The small research ship drifted in the empty space between the stars. Its blue crystal hull was cracked in many places, and air was slowly leaking out into the dark void. Inside the ship, Captain Zarathiel held her communication device with shaking hands. Her long, thin fingers were pale with fear as she watched the enemy ships surround her vessel. The Korthak raiders had found them 3 hours ago. The peaceful Etherian research team had been studying ancient star formations when the attack ships appeared from nowhere. Now 15 black warships circled the damaged research vessel like hungry predators around wounded prey. Zarathiel looked around the bridge at her crew. Dr. Kelvin was trying to stop the bleeding from a cut on his head. Engineer Mira worked frantically at her console, but the ship's weapons had been destroyed in the first attack. The other researchers huddled together near the back wall, their large eyes wide with terror. The Korthak were known across the galaxy as raiders and slavers. They attacked peaceful ships, stole everything valuable, and took the crew to sell in the dark markets of the Outer Rim. The galactic government did nothing to stop them. The major powers were too busy fighting each other over trade routes and mining rights. Through the cracked viewport, Zarathiel could see the Korthak boarding pods getting ready to launch. The enemy ships were massive, covered in dark armor and bristling with weapons. Each one was 3 times the size of her research vessel. Their hulls were painted with the skull symbols of their raiding clans. Captain Vextar of the Korthak flagship sent a message to the research ship. His voice was cold and cruel through the speakers. "Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Fight us and we will take our time with each of you." Zarathiel knew what that meant. The Korthak enjoyed causing pain. They would torture her crew before selling the survivors to the slave markets. She had heard the stories from other attacks. Ships found drifting empty, their crews taken. The lucky ones died during the boarding. The unlucky ones disappeared forever. The captain made a desperate decision. Her ship's long-range transmitter still had power for one final message. She could send a distress call, but who would come? The Etherian military was weeks away. The other galactic powers would ignore a call for help from a small research vessel. But there was one possibility. The old star chart showed a quarantine zone nearby. Inside that zone was a solar system with a single inhabited planet. The beings there were called humans, but most people knew them by another name: Deathworlders. Every civilized species in the galaxy feared the Deathworlders. They came from a planet so dangerous that simply living there had turned them into natural killers. Their world had extreme weather, deadly creatures, and diseases that could kill most other species just by breathing the air. The humans who survived on that nightmare planet were said to be violent beyond measure. The galactic government had placed their entire solar system under quarantine 50 years ago. No ships were allowed to enter human space. No contact was permitted with the Deathworlders. The official reason was to protect other species from human violence and aggression. But Zarathiel had read the old exploration reports. Some human ships had been seen patrolling the edges of their space. They never attacked anyone, but they watched, always watching from the shadows at the edge of known space. She programmed the distress call quickly. The message was simple: her ship's location, identification codes, and a plea for help from anyone who might be listening. She aimed the transmission toward the quarantine zone around the human homeworld. "What are you doing?" Dr. Kelvin asked, looking over her shoulder at the communication console. "Sending a message to the only people who might come," Zarathiel replied. "The humans?" Kelvin's voice was full of horror. "Captain, they are Deathworlders. They are more dangerous than the Korthak." "Are they?" Zarathiel asked quietly. "Have you ever heard of humans attacking research ships? Have you heard of them taking slaves or torturing prisoners?" Kelvin was quiet. Nobody had heard such stories about humans. The fear of Deathworlders came from their reputation as warriors, not as criminals. They were said to be violent but not cruel like the Korthak. The first boarding pod slammed into the research ship's hull. The impact shook the entire vessel and knocked several crew members to the floor. Emergency alarms began to sound as the ship's computer detected the breach. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Engineer Mira reported. "They are cutting through the airlock doors." More boarding pods hit the ship. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as Korthak warriors forced their way inside. The raiders wore heavy battle armor and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. Zarathiel activated the ship's internal communication system. "All crew to the bridge. Seal the emergency doors behind you." She knew it would not stop the raiders for long, but it might buy them a few more minutes. Her distress call was already traveling through space at the speed of light. If any human ships were patrolling near their borders, they would receive the message in about 6 hours. But the Korthak would not wait 6 hours to finish their attack. The bridge door shook as something heavy slammed against them from outside. The Korthak were using cutting tools to break through the thick metal barriers. Sparks flew as their plasma cutters slowly carved through the door. "Captain," whispered Dr. Kelvin, "what if the humans do not come? What if they receive our message and decide to ignore it?" Zorathiel did not answer. She was thinking about the stories she had heard as a child, tales of the Deathworlders and their terrible world, but also stories of human explorers who had helped other species in the early days of galactic contact. Those stories were old and mostly forgotten, but they spoke of humans who risked their lives to save others. The cutting was almost finished. Through the gap in the door, she could see the red eyes of Korthak warriors gleaming in the darkness. Their breathing apparatus made horrible hissing sounds as they worked. "If the humans come," she said quietly, "we need to survive until they get here." The bridge crew gathered what weapons they could find: hand tools from the repair kit, chemical sprays from the laboratory, anything that might serve as a weapon. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. But they would fight if they had to. The door finally gave way with a crash of twisted metal. 4 Korthak raiders rushed through the opening, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Their leader was tall and covered in scars from many battles. His armor was decorated with the bones of his victims. "So," the Korthak leader hissed, "the little researchers want to play soldier." His weapon charged with a high-pitched whine. "This will be fun." 6 hours away, traveling through the vast emptiness between stars, a small radio signal carried the desperate message from the research ship. It was a simple plea for help, sent by beings who had never met a human but were willing to trust their lives to creatures they had been taught to fear. The message raced toward human space, carrying with it the hopes of 12 terrified researchers and the promise of first contact between 2 very different species. Whether that contact would bring salvation or doom remained to be seen. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, looking out at the stars through the massive viewport. The human dreadnought was the flagship of the 4th Fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in human space. Its dark hull stretched for over 2 kilometers, bristling with weapons and armor that could withstand almost anything the galaxy could throw at it. The bridge was busy with activity as usual. Officers moved between their stations, monitoring sensors and communications from across human territory. The Retribution and her fleet patrolled the edges of the quarantine zone, watching for any signs of alien activity near human worlds. Lieutenant Commander Johnson approached the Admiral's command chair. His face showed the excitement and worry that came with unexpected news. "Admiral, we have received something unusual from the communications array." Chen turned to face her communications officer. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen 30 years of military service. "What kind of unusual, Commander?" "A distress call, ma'am, but not from any human ship." Johnson handed her a data pad with the decoded message. "Our AI systems translated it from something called Galactic Standard. It appears to be from an alien research vessel under attack by raiders." Chen read the message carefully. The translation was clear enough, even if the language patterns were strange. Coordinates, ship identification, and a simple plea for help. She looked up at the tactical display showing local space. The position given in the message was only 6 hours away at maximum speed. "How long ago was this sent?" she asked. "The signal reached us 4 minutes ago, but based on the transmission point, it was sent about 2 hours ago." Chen felt her stomach tighten. If the message was 2 hours old, the research ship might already be destroyed. But there was still a chance some of the crew survived. Alien raiders often took prisoners to sell as slaves. "Commander Harris," Chen called to her tactical officer. "What do we know about this area of space?" Harris pulled up star charts on the main screen. "The coordinates are in a sector we have been monitoring for several years. We have detected raider activity there before, but no alien government claims authority over it. Seems to be a lawless region where pirates operate freely. Any idea who these raiders might be?" "Based on the ship signatures we have recorded, probably Korthak. They are a species known for attacking civilian vessels. Intelligence reports suggest they operate in groups of 10 to 20 ships and prefer to take prisoners rather than simply destroy their targets." Chen had read the intelligence files on various alien species, The Korthak were among the worst. They were slavers and pirates who enjoyed causing pain. Their attacks on peaceful ships were legendary throughout the galaxy. The fact that they were attacking a research vessel full of scientists made her anger burn hotter. "Ma'am," Johnson interrupted her thoughts, "there is something else. This appears to be the first time any alien species has directly asked humans for help. Our xenology department believes this could be an important moment for human-alien relations." Chen understood the implications. For 50 years, humans had been isolated behind their quarantine zone. The galaxy feared them as violent Deathworlders and refused all contact. Now, for the first time, aliens in desperate trouble had reached out to humanity for help. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "All ships to battle stations. Plot a course for these coordinates at maximum burn. We are going to investigate this distress call." The bridge erupted into activity as officers carried out her orders. The massive engines of the Retribution began to power up, creating a deep thrumming sound that echoed through the ship's hull. Throughout the fleet, 14 other warships prepared for combat operations. Chen opened a private communication channel to her ship captains. The faces of her commanders appeared on her personal screen. These were experienced officers who had served with her through many dangerous missions. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have received a distress call from an alien research vessel under attack by raiders. This is humanity's first chance to make contact with peaceful alien species. I want everyone to understand what this means." Captain Rodriguez of the heavy cruiser Defiance spoke first. "Admiral, what are the rules of engagement? Do we have authorization to use force against alien vessels?" "The raiders are attacking civilians," Chen replied firmly. "That makes them pirates in my book. We will treat them as we would treat any pirates attacking innocent people. As for authorization, I'm authorizing it right now under Section 7 of the Colonial Defense Act." Captain Williams of the destroyer Vengeance raised a concern. "What if this is a trap? What if the aliens are trying to lure us into an ambush?" Chen had considered that possibility. "Then we will deal with it as we always do. But I do not think this is a trap." The message came from a research vessel, not a military ship. The transmission patterns match what our intelligence suggests is normal civilian communication. The fleet was now moving at full speed toward the coordinates. The powerful human engines pushed the ships to incredible velocities, eating up the distance between them and the alien distress call. Chen watched the countdown timer on her screen. 5 hours and 30 minutes until arrival. "Admiral," Communications Officer Johnson reported, "we are detecting weapon fire at the target coordinates. Energy signatures consistent with ship-to-ship combat. Any signs of the research vessel? Difficult to tell at this distance, but there appears to be at least one large object surrounded by multiple smaller ones. The smaller objects match the signatures of Korthak raider ships." Chen clenched her fists. The aliens who had called for help were still fighting for their lives. She hoped they could hold out for 5 more hours. "All ships increase to emergency speed," she ordered. "Damage to engines is acceptable. We need to get there before those research scientists are killed or captured." The fleet pushed harder, their engines running beyond safe limits. Human engineering was robust, built to withstand the punishment of operating in the dangerous environment around Earth. The ships could handle the stress, but it would cost them time in dry dock for repairs later. Chen began planning the attack. 15 human warships against an unknown number of Korthak raiders. The intelligence files suggested Korthak ships were powerful, but relied on outdated tactics. They preferred to overwhelm their enemies with superior numbers rather than superior technology. Human military doctrine was different. Earth's violent environment had taught humanity to fight smart rather than fight fair. Human weapons were designed for maximum efficiency at extreme ranges. Human tactics emphasized speed, coordination, and overwhelming firepower applied at exactly the right moment. "Tactical," Chen called out. "Begin long-range sensor sweeps of the target area. I want to know exactly how many ships we are facing and what their capabilities are." "Yes, ma'am." Estimated time to detailed sensor contact is 4 hours 20 minutes. Chen settled back in her command chair and began to plan. This would be humanity's first military action outside their own space, their first contact with alien civilians, their first chance to show the galaxy that humans were more than just violent Deathworlders. The Retribution and her fleet raced through the darkness between stars, carrying with them the hopes of a species that had waited 50 years for a chance to prove they belonged among the civilized peoples of the galaxy. Behind them, Earth turned in its orbit around the sun, unaware that its children were about to make their mark on galactic history. Ahead of them, desperate aliens fought for their lives against raiders who had never faced the fury of aroused Deathworlders. Captain Vextar stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching his boarding teams tear apart the alien research vessel. The Korthak commander was pleased with how the attack was going. His warriors had captured most of the research ship without serious resistance. The alien crew was weak and poorly armed, just as he had expected from peaceful scientists. The Korthak were a warrior species that had conquered dozens of worlds through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. Vextar himself had led raids on over 50 civilian ships during his long career. This attack was proceeding exactly like all the others. His sensor operator suddenly looked up from his console with confusion on his scarred face. "Captain, I am detecting approaching ships. 15 vessels heading directly toward our position." Vextar moved to the tactical display. Strange ship signatures were indeed approaching their location. The vessels were large, comparable in size to his own warships. But their energy patterns were unfamiliar. He had never seen ships quite like these before. "What species?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The computer cannot identify their origin or design, but they are moving very fast and will reach us in approximately 1 hour." Vextar studied the display thoughtfully. 15 ships against his own flotilla of 15 vessels seemed like fair odds. His captains were experienced raiders with proven ships and weapons. These newcomers, whoever they were, could not possibly match Korthak military superiority. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Form attack formation Beta 7. When the unknown ships arrive, we will destroy them and continue with our salvage operations." The Korthak vessels moved into their traditional battle formation. The larger ships formed the center line while smaller destroyers took positions on the flanks. It was a formation that had served them well in dozens of battles against various alien species. Vextar was not concerned about the approaching fleet. His ships carried the latest Korthak weapons technology, energy cannons that could melt through the strongest armor, missile systems that could track targets across vast distances, shields that had protected his vessels through countless battles. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "the approaching ships are still accelerating. They should be slowing down to engage us, but their speed is increasing." "Foolish," Vextar muttered. "They plan to rush past our formation and attack from behind." A classic but predictable tactic. Signal our rear guard to prepare for flanking attacks. But something was wrong with his analysis. The human fleet was not trying to flank the Korthak formation. Instead, they were approaching head-on at incredible speed. Long-range sensors showed the unknown. Ships were bristling with unusual weapon systems that the Korthak computers could not identify. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display on the Retribution's bridge as her fleet closed the distance to the Korthak raiders. The alien ships had formed a standard battle line, exactly as human intelligence had predicted they would. The Korthak were experienced fighters, but they relied on old tactics that human strategists had studied for years. "Range to target?" she asked calmly. 400,000 kilometers and closing," her tactical officer replied. "Enemy vessels are moving into defensive positions around the research ship." Chen nodded. The Korthak were doing exactly what she expected. They assumed the approaching human fleet would engage them at close range, the way most species preferred to fight. But humans had learned space combat in the deadly environment around Earth, where quick thinking and superior technology were the keys to survival. "All ships," she announced over the fleet communication channel, "engage designated targets at maximum range. Fire when ready." The human fleet opened fire while still hundreds of thousands of kilometers from the enemy formation. Railgun batteries that had been designed to destroy asteroids threatening Earth now targeted the Korthak warships with devastating precision. Tungsten projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed reached across the vast distances of space in seconds. Vextar watched in shock as 3 of his destroyers simply disappeared from the tactical display. No warning, no incoming missile signatures, just sudden destruction that his sensors could barely detect. The projectiles that had destroyed his ships were moving too fast for his equipment to track properly. "What kind of weapons are those?" he shouted at his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. Some kind of kinetic projectile system. But the range and velocity are beyond anything we have seen before." More human projectiles slammed into the Korthak formation. A heavy cruiser lost its entire forward section to a tungsten slug, traveling at 12% of light speed. Another destroyer simply broke apart as multiple rounds tore through its hull. The Korthak tried to return fire, but their energy weapons had nowhere near the range of the human railguns. Their missiles were fast, but not fast enough to catch ships that could change course and speed with such incredible agility. All ships close to engagement range, Vextar ordered desperately. We cannot fight them from this distance. But the human fleet had no intention of allowing a close-range battle. As the Korthak ships tried to advance, human fighters deployed from their carrier vessels. These small craft were unlike anything the raiders had ever encountered. Most species built their fighters for speed and sensors. They were elegant craft designed to gather information and engage targets from safe distances. Human fighters were different. They were heavily armored killing machines built to survive in the chaos of close combat. The human pilots who flew these fighters had been shaped by evolution on a world where everything tried to kill them. They had learned to hunt across the African savannas, to track persistent predators through dense forests, to survive in conditions that would kill most other species. Now they brought those same instincts to space combat. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez dove her fighter through the Korthak formation, her weapons blazing. The enemy ships were firing everything they had at the attacking human craft, but the fighters were too fast and too well armored to stop easily. When her missiles ran out, she used her fighter itself as a weapon, ramming it into the engine section of a Korthak destroyer. The Korthak formation collapsed into chaos as human fighters swarmed through their ranks. The raiders had never faced opponents who fought with such suicidal aggression. Most species valued their lives too highly to use their own ships as weapons. But humans had evolved as persistence hunters who would chase their prey to exhaustion, even at the cost of their own lives. Captain Vexitar realized his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he did not understand. These were not the civilized tactics used by most galactic species. This was something primitive and terrifying, like fighting wild animals instead of intelligent beings. "Captain," his sensor operator called out in panic. "The large enemy ships are moving to point-blank range. They are going to finish us off." Vextar looked at the tactical display one last time. 8 of his 15 ships were gone. The survivors were damaged and scattered. The approaching human vessels showed no signs of damage despite flying through the heaviest weapons fire the Korthak could produce. He had one choice left. "All ships retreat! Emergency jump to hyperspace!" But only 3 Korthak vessels had enough power left in their engines to escape. The rest were trapped in normal space as the human dreadnoughts closed in for the final blow. The last thing Vextar saw before his own ship jumped away was the research vessel they had been attacking, still intact and protected by the strange warriors who had answered its distress call. The battle was over in less than 30 minutes. 12 Korthak warships lay destroyed in the void, their hulls torn open by weapons they had never imagined possible. The few survivors would carry word of this defeat back to their homeworld, along with stories of the terrifying species that fought like demons and protected strangers as if they were family. For the first time in galactic history, the Korthak Dominion had encountered an enemy they could not defeat, could not understand, and could not forget. The Deathworlders had announced their presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Captain Zarathiel crouched behind the overturned research table on her ship's bridge, trying to stop the bleeding from a cut on her arm. The Korthak raiders had been torturing her crew for information about Etherian research facilities when something incredible happened. The ship's sensors detected massive weapon fire outside, followed by the sound of Korthak vessels exploding. Through the cracked viewport, she could see the burning wreckage of enemy ships drifting in space. Whoever had answered her distress call was winning the battle against the raiders, but she had no idea who her rescuers might be. The remaining Korthak warriors on her ship were growing nervous. Their leader, the scarred captain who had been enjoying the torture session, was now shouting orders into his communication device. But his calls to the raider fleet were answered only by static. "What is happening out there?" Dr. Kelvin whispered from his hiding place behind a damaged console. "I think someone came to help us," Zarathiel replied quietly. "The question is who?" Her answer came sooner than expected. New sounds echoed through the ship's corridors. Heavy footsteps, but different from the Korthak boots they had been hearing. These steps were more controlled, more organized. Then came a series of small explosions, each one closer than the last. The Korthak leader grabbed Zarathiel and pulled her to her feet. He pressed his energy weapon against her neck and shouted toward the bridge entrance. "Stay back. I will kill the research captain if you come any closer." The footsteps stopped just outside the bridge. Then a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, though with an accent Zarathiel did not recognize. "Release the prisoners and surrender your weapons. You will not be harmed if you cooperate." "Who are you?" the Korthak demanded. "Sergeant Rodriguez, Terran Marine Corps. You have attacked a civilian research vessel and taken innocent people prisoner. This is your only chance to surrender peacefully." Zarathiel felt her heart skip a beat. Terran meant human. The beings who had answered her distress call were the legendary Deathworlders. She had called for help from the most feared species in the galaxy, and they had actually come. The Korthak leader laughed harshly. "Humans, I have heard stories about you Deathworlders. You may be good fighters, but you are not good enough to save these researchers. I will kill them all before you can reach me." "No," Sergeant Rodriguez replied calmly. "You will not." What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but Zarathiel would remember every detail for the rest of her life. Small objects flew through the bridge entrance and exploded with brilliant flashes of light and deafening sound. The Korthak warriors were blinded and stunned, but somehow the explosions did not harm any of the research crew. Armored figures rushed onto the bridge with incredible speed and precision. They moved like they had trained for this exact situation 1,000 times. Each human marine targeted a specific enemy, using weapons that seemed to knock out the Korthak rather than kill them. The Korthak leader tried to shoot Zarathiel, but a human warrior hit him with something that looked like a controlled lightning bolt. The raider collapsed, unconscious but still breathing. In seconds, every enemy soldier on the bridge was down, and none of the research crew had been harmed. The lead marine removed his helmet, and Zarathiel gasped. She had expected the Deathworlders to be monsters, but the face looking down at her showed genuine concern and kindness. The human was tall and muscular as she had expected, but his eyes were gentle as he knelt beside her. "Are you injured?" Sergeant Rodriguez asked in carefully pronounced galactic standard. "Not seriously," Zarathiel managed to say. She was having trouble believing this was really happening. You learned our language?" Rodriguez smiled, and it was a surprisingly warm expression. "We have been monitoring galactic communications for decades. Learning your languages, studying your cultures. We have been waiting for someone to call us." Other Marines were checking on the rest of her crew. They moved with the same controlled aggression she had seen during the rescue, but now their weapons were put away. They treated the wounded researchers with surprising gentleness, using medical equipment that seemed more advanced than anything in the Etherian medical database. "I do not understand," Dr. Kelvin said, as a Marine bandaged his head wound. "Why did you come? We are strangers to you." "You asked for help," Rodriguez replied simply. "That is enough." Marine medics began arriving on the bridge with equipment to treat the more seriously wounded. Zarathiel watched in amazement as these supposed violent monsters worked to save her crew with skill that rivaled the best Etherian doctors. "Your people," she said to Rodriguez. "They are not what we were told." "What were you told about us?" "That you were dangerous, violent beyond measure. That your world made you into natural killers who could not be trusted around civilized species." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Some of that is true. Our world is dangerous, and it did make us into fighters. But it also taught us other things. It taught us to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It taught us that strength should be used to help others, not to hurt them." More human personnel were arriving to help with repairs to the research ship. Engineers who worked alongside Etherian technicians to fix damaged systems. Supply officers who provided food and medical supplies without being asked. Security teams who removed the unconscious Korthak raiders without harming them further. "What will you do with the prisoners?" Zarathiel asked. "Turn them over to whatever authority you prefer," Rodriguez replied. "They committed crimes against your people. You should decide their fate." This surprised her even more. Most species who won battles kept their prisoners for their own purposes. The humans were offering to give up their captives to a species they had never met before. "I need to contact my government," she said. "They need to know what happened here. Of course, our communication officers will help you send any messages you need to send. And Captain, we would be honored if you would allow us to escort your ship to safety." Zarathiel looked around at her crew. They were injured and frightened, but they were alive. The ship that had been under attack by 15 enemy vessels was now protected by the most powerful military force any of them had ever seen. But more than that, they had discovered something that would change everything. The galaxy thought it knew about humans. The Deathworlders were not the monsters they had been portrayed as. They were protectors who crossed light years to help strangers and asked for nothing in return. Dr. Kelvin approached her carefully. "Captain, what do we tell the consortium about this?" Zarathiel looked at Sergeant Rodriguez, who was coordinating the repair efforts with quiet efficiency. Around the bridge, human Marines worked alongside Etherian researchers as if they had known each other for years. There was no sign of the violence and aggression that supposedly made humans too dangerous for galactic society. "We tell them the truth," she said firmly. "We tell them that we called for help and the humans answered. We tell them that everything we thought we knew about Deathworlders was wrong." The rescue operation continued for several hours. Human engineers repaired the research ship's engines and life support systems. Human doctors treated every injured crew member. Human supply officers replaced everything the Korthak had stolen or destroyed. Through it all, the Marines maintained their professional attitude while showing genuine care for the alien researchers they had saved. They shared stories, helped with technical problems, and even prepared meals using ingredients from both ships. As her vessel prepared to depart under human escort, Zarathiel realized she was witnessing the beginning of something historic. First contact between humanity and the rest of the galaxy was not happening in some formal diplomatic setting. It was happening here in the aftermath of a rescue operation between soldiers and scientists who had found common ground in the vastness of space. The galaxy was about to learn that its greatest fear might actually be its greatest hope. The news traveled across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days of the rescue, every major species had heard the story of the Etherian research vessel and the humans who had answered their distress call. The official report from Captain Zarathiel described not monsters, but protectors who had appeared when called and asked for nothing in return. The Etherian Consortium was the first government to change its position on human contact. Ambassador Kelleth stood before the Galactic Council just 1 week after the incident and delivered a speech that shocked the assembled delegates. "For 50 years, we have isolated the humans because we feared them," Kelleth announced. "But fear based on assumptions is not wisdom. The beings we call dangerous Deathworlders risked their lives to save our people from raiders. They treated our wounded, repaired our ship, and asked for no reward. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our position." The reaction was immediate and divided. Some species agreed that the humans deserved a chance to prove themselves. Others argued that one rescue operation did not erase the danger posed by a species evolved on such a violent world. But the debate became academic as more reports began to surface. Human patrol ships were appearing throughout the Rim territories, always in response to distress calls from civilian vessels under attack. The results were always the same. Raiders destroyed or driven off, civilians rescued and protected. No demands made for payment or political favors. Captain Vextar limped his damaged ship back to the Korthak homeworld with only 2 other survivors from his once proud fleet. His report to the Dominion leadership was met with disbelief and then growing fear as they realized what it meant. 15 ships destroyed in 30 minutes? High Commander Thexkar demanded. By an enemy you had never seen before? They fight like nothing we have encountered, Vextar replied, his voice still shaking from the memory. Their weapons have impossible range and power. Their fighters attack like they do not care if they die. And their main ships, he paused, struggling to find words. They are not just warships. They are floating fortresses built by a species that learned war from living on a world that tries to kill them every day. The Korthak Dominion faced a choice they had never confronted before. For generations they had preyed on peaceful species because no one was strong enough or willing enough to stop them. Now there was a new power in the galaxy, one that seemed to exist solely to protect the innocent from predators like themselves. "What do we do?" asked Commander Zethvas, leader of the 3rd Raiding Fleet. "We adapt," Thexkar replied grimly. "We find sectors where the humans do not patrol. We avoid civilian ships that might call for their help. And we pray to the void spirits that they do not decide to hunt us down on our own worlds." But the Korthak were not the only ones learning to fear the sound of human voices on communication channels. Pirates, slavers, and raiders throughout the galaxy began to encounter human patrols with increasing frequency. The pattern was always the same: a distress call from civilian ships, followed by the arrival of human warships that brought swift and overwhelming retaliation. The humans never conquered territory or demanded tribute. They simply protected the innocent and disappeared back into space, leaving behind grateful survivors and the burning wreckage of those who had threatened them. Ambassador Chen Su-lin stood before the Galactic Council 6 months after the first rescue operation. She was the first official human representative to address the galaxy's governing body, and her presence had been requested by a unanimous vote of the member species. "Honorable delegates," she began, speaking in perfect galactic standard, "humanity thanks you for this opportunity to address the Council. We know that our species has been feared and isolated for many years. We understand that our world and our nature have caused concern among the civilized peoples of the galaxy." The Council chamber was silent as representatives from dozens of species listened to the first official words from humanity in 50 years. "We do not ask you to ignore what we are," Chen continued. "We are the products of a dangerous world that taught us to fight for survival every day of our existence. We are capable of terrible violence when necessary. These things are true." She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from species that had voted to quarantine her homeworld. "But we are also the products of a world that taught us other lessons. It taught us that the strong must protect the weak. It taught us that survival means working together against common threats. It taught us that intelligence and cooperation are more powerful than individual strength." The Etherian delegate, Captain Zarathiel herself, stood to speak. "Ambassador Chen, the Etherian Consortium wishes to formally thank humanity for the rescue of our research vessel. But we also wish to ask a question that troubles many in this chamber. Why do your people help strangers? What do you gain from protecting civilian ships?" Chen smiled, and it was the same gentle expression that had surprised so many rescued crews. "Captain Zarathiel, on our world we have a saying. The measure of a civilization is how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. We help because it is right to help. We protect because the innocent deserve protection. We gain nothing material from these actions, but we gain something more valuable." "And what is that?" asked the Korthak representative, one of the few raiders brave enough to attend the council session. "We gain the knowledge that we have lived up to our own values. We gain friends among species we had never met. We gain the hope that the galaxy can become a place where peaceful beings do not have to fear those who are stronger." The debate that followed lasted for days. Some delegates argued that humanity should be welcomed with full membership in galactic civilization. Others maintained that the Deathworlders were too dangerous to trust, despite their recent actions. The final vote was closer than many expected, but the result was clear. Humanity would be invited to join galactic civilization, not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals. The quarantine around human space was lifted, and official diplomatic relations were established with all major galactic powers. The changes came quickly after that. Human patrol fleets began operating openly in conjunction with other species' security forces. Human engineers shared their advanced technology in exchange for access to galactic scientific databases. Human doctors brought their expertise in trauma medicine to worlds throughout civilized space. But the most important change was psychological. For the first time in galactic history, civilian ships traveling through dangerous space knew that if they called for help, someone would answer. The galaxy had found its guardians in the species they had once feared most. Captain Vexistar sat in his cell on the prison world of Kethmaran, serving a life sentence for his crimes against civilian vessels. Through his small window, he could see the stars and sometimes the running lights of passing ships. He knew that many of those ships carried human crews, protecting the trade routes and keeping the peace in sectors that had once belonged to raiders like himself. The Korthak Dominion still existed, but its power was broken. Pirates and slavers throughout the galaxy had learned to avoid sectors patrolled by human fleets. The age of preying on the innocent was ending, brought to a close by the species that had once been quarantined as too dangerous for civilized contact. In the vast emptiness of space, a small research vessel sent out a routine transmission to nearby ships. Location, mission status, and estimated arrival time. It was the kind of message that peaceful ships had sent for centuries, but now there was a difference. Now, someone was always listening. Someone who would cross light years to help a stranger in distress. Someone who had learned that the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the courage to protect. The Deathworlders had found their place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as guardians, and the universe was safer because of it.